Let's solve the equation x cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x is less than 0. And we use the same steps we were discussing previously for solving higher degree inequalities. First thing we want to do, step 1, is to factor the non-zero side. All right, so we pull out the common factor of x, and then we factor the second degree factor further by guessing. We get x times x plus 3 times x minus 1 for the left side. Step 2, we're going to remove the inequality sign, replace it with an equal sign, and solve the equation. X times x plus 3 times x minus 1 equals 0. Set each of the factors equal to 0. We got x equals 0 together with x equals negative 3 together with x equals 1 when we solve each of our little equations set equal to 0. Step 3, we're going to use the real solution, which indeed all of these solutions are real numbers. There's no imaginary number I in 0, negative 3, or 1. We're going to use those three real numbers to partition a number line and then consider the sign of each of the factors in step 2 and the sign of their product in each of the regions. So here's our step 3. Here's our number line. We're going to partition it at negative 3, 0, and 1. Now, the product, each of the factors have a sign of, we'll choose a value in the first region, any value that's smaller than negative 3, plug it in, like negative 100 will do. Plug it in and see what the sign of each of the factors are. Negative times a negative times a negative gives us a negative, because it's the first two negatives give you a positive, and then the last one times a positive times a negative gives you a negative. Now, in the middle region between negative 3 and 0, choose some value, any value in between those two numbers. Like, let's say, I don't know, negative 1. Plug it into each of the three factors. What sign do you get? We get a negative sign for the first, a positive sign for the second, a negative sign for the third. Now, we multiply those signs together, and we get a positive result. Between 0 and 1, choose like x equals 1/2. Plug it in for x in each of the three factors. We get a positive times a negative. That gives us a positive times a negative, gives us a negative. And finally, for the last region, values of x greater than 1, let's choose something like x equals 100. Plug it in, we get a positive times a positive times a positive. So once again, what we're doing here is we're taking each of the three factors that we have in step 2, the x plus 3, and the x minus 1. We're choosing a value for x in each of these four regions, plugging them in and checking what the sign is for each of the factors, then multiplying the signs together to see what the product of each of the factor signs gives us. So we have a negative for the first region, a positive for the middle, a negative for the next, and a positive for the last. Now, it's alternating. Don't count on that always happening. Just check it to make sure. Go ahead and plug an x value in from that region and check the signs. Okay, step 4 is where we're supposed to, we're supposed to find the product, the sign of the product, which we did. So let's go to step 5. We go back to step 1 for this portion. Step 1 said that the product of these three factors is less than 0. But what does it mean to be less than 0? It means the product has to be negative. So go back up to the graph in step 3 and 4 and shade only the regions that gave you a negative result. That's going to be the leftmost region with an arrow and the middle, the region between 0 and 1. Now don't do anything to the endpoints, negative 3, 0, and 1, because we have to do that in the next step. Step 6, examine the original inequality sign at the top. It was a less than symbol where there was no equal portion in it. That means we're going to exclude the endpoint by using round brackets. Now, if there had been an equal portion in that inequality sign, like less than or equal, then we would have put boxy brackets on each of the endpoints, but it was excluded. There was no equal portion, so we're putting round brackets at negative 3, at 0, and at 1. Now we'll write our solutions in the three notations. Set notation, curly set bracket, all real numbers x, such that x is less than negative 3, union together with 0, less than x, less than 1. Now do you see that? Close your bracket. You first describe the leftmost shading. That's everything, all the x values less than negative 3. And then for the right shading that we have, it's between 0 and 1. it's enclosed. It's got the 0 on the left, the smaller number, the larger number 1 on the right, and the inequality signs, of course, are moved in a less than direction. Now we describe each of those two regions by interval notation. We have for the first description, for interval form, everything from open bracket negative infinity to negative 3 open bracket, union together with open bracket 0 to 1 open bracket. And for graph notation, we're just going to repeat the picture from steps 3 and 4. Okay, we got our negative 3, shading between 0 and 1, open brackets, shading, and those represent our 3 forms of our solution. Every x value in those solutions will satisfy the given inequality.